Welcome to the Closer Experience, our midweek experience at the Leadership Church. Closer is a place where believers can grow closer to God. At TLC, we believe that making a spiritual development enhances our relationship with God, and that is more than a Sunday experience. And our Closer community provides just that. And now, the Closer Experience.
Mental health problems are common and affect almost every family. In the United States, nearly 1 in 5 adults experience some form of mental illness, with 1 in 24 having a serious mental illness. Although mental illness is very prevalent in the U.S., as a country, we struggle with having open and honest conversation about these issues due to the stigma associated with mental illness. Faith and community leaders are essential in these conversations, as they are often the first place that individuals and families reach out to when they experience challenges, mental health issues, and/or traumatic events. The faith community and leaders are pillars of the community and are significant assets when promoting mental wellness and recovery. Throughout the month of May, the Leadership Church will discuss the faith community and mental health. Join us for a conversation on women in ministry and mental health with Pastor Eleshia V, Reverend Dr. Libya BaaQar, and Dr. Adrienne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Closer Experience. My name is Pastor Eleshia V, and I am joined today by some phenomenal women as we dive into the conversation regarding mental health. As you know, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we've chosen the conversation faith and mental health. To my right, I have Dr. Libya BaaQar, and I also have Dr. Adrienne, and I'm going to turn as our behavioral health specialist in faith and mental health. Dr. Adrienne?
So glad to be here with you ladies this morning. And so it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And you know, the conversations about mental health have become more prevalent since COVID. And so I'm excited about that because I've been a psychotherapist for 33 years. Wow. So I was one of the first Black females licensed in the state of Georgia. And so even having these conversations to be expanded is something that I'm excited about because I've been having this conversation for a long time. But among Black people in particular, there's still a lot of stigma associated with talking about mental health. People think you have to be crazy. And so then when it comes to the church, that's a whole nother conversation because as Black people, a lot of us are raised to just pray about it. Just get on your knees and pray about it. And so I am thankful when I see churches that go the next step, which is to say, we might need some other professionals to be a part of this conversation. So as women in ministry, what have been some of the challenges that you have faced in terms of mental health, and when you have parishioners who are dealing with mental health crisis, what has your approach been?
I'm going to say that I'm not the type of ministerial leader that just totally relies on, okay, just pray about it and that be it. You know, we do start from our spiritual foundation components because that is most important, like how we're connecting with God. But we also lean into if there's a further step that needs to be taken, and a lot of times there are, then we do recommend that you go see a mental health therapist. I think there's nothing wrong with being able to do that. That's one thing Dr. Libby and I, we talk consistently about as women in ministry, about being able to make sure that you are mentally healthy, and the fact that church folk need to go to see therapists. Will you say so?
Yeah, I think Jesus and the therapist works.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think what we've done, we've had a directory so that we can refer them. And I think that's one thing that churches need to continue to do is to really rely upon the resources in their congregation.
That's correct.
Because therapists, they love Jesus too. They are in church. They're going to church.
Well, some of them.
Some of them. You're right. You're right. But they are members in the church.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't rely upon our membership. And even if we go outside of that, there's still a directory. I'm part of the AME denomination, and we have a ton who are chaplains, who are licensed counselors. I just left a conference, and in that conference, they were talking about using those resources of clinicians,
Right.
and not relying upon the pastors or the ministerial staff ability to try to deal with mental health issues. It really is beyond our pay grade.
But I would imagine that it's a challenge for you all when you have elders in your congregation who may not subscribe to therapy. You know, I think about my father's a Vietnam veteran, war veteran, who suffers from PTSD and some, but when it came to having conversations about counseling, that was not something he was subscribing to. Even when at the VA, they were recommending, come participate in this group, or even understanding what I do. My father used to ask me for years, now, what is it that you do again? And so one day he was watching Dr. Phil, and I said, that guy right there? I said, I'm the black female version of him. He said, oh, that's what you do. And so, but when you have people of a certain generation, their upbringing and experience, for all of us, it's going to impact who it is that you become.
Right.
And so perhaps if you have elders in your church, how do you all have that conversation with them for them to understand that things have changed and that this might be something that's necessary in terms of expanding conversations about mental health and outreach inside the church?
I think that's a great work, and I think it's an ongoing work. But I think the way that we have approached it, we still approach it in the pastoral way.
Yeah.
And in that way, you may have to start with the sit down in the office and in a sense, begin some kind of pastoral counseling.
Right.
And in that pastoral counseling, say, I have a really good friend, who can really help you, blah, 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 whatever it is. And I've used that person before, and here is what that person's offering. Presenting it, I think, is the way. If you say the word counseling sometimes to that elder or seasoned population, you're going to get that pushback and that rejection.
Yeah.
But I think if you use it in a very pastoral way, the other thing is when you say to that seasoned member or whomever that the person is a Christian, it changes the dynamics and makes them more open. So that's kind of how we've been able to do
for
it.
For some people, though.
But with the older population in the church, so like the church members, they're very big on who knows Jesus and who's in it. You can do it a little different with the younger group. They if it's a therapist and they're not necessarily in church, they're okay with that.
Yeah.
Like my mother's generation or older, they weren't a Christian.
Yeah.
And they will push it that way. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because my older sister is mentally ill. She was diagnosed severe schizophrenic. And at a time when, praying away, praising away, kind of thing. And we were ignorant to the needs that the things that she needed.
Right. Or locked people away.
Absolutely.
At a certain time, because that's all they knew to do was to institutionalize people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we didn't get that necessarily help from the church. But I do remember the pastor of the church I was in at the time. I remember him sitting in silence while we were going through so many different dynamics and emotions, and he listened to us. And then he slipped us a person's name. And my mother said, is that person a Christian? That's what she said, because for her, she wanted to know, and she felt better for whatever reason, that comfort to know that she was going to another Christian. I think just the whole representation of that, the image of that for them. It is a hard piece, I think, to struggle with the elder in their perception of things.
It is. I too found that even with walking the elderly through grief. And so that has been something that has been challenging with us when we were walking with the elderly through that. And someone would say, oh, we recommend that you sit down and speak to someone. I'm good. And so it's like, no, when we do our check-ins, we can tell that you're not good. Right?
Yeah.
And so we can only walk you through so far.
Yeah.
And then after that, we feel like another layer to this would be that you go, and if you and having the recommendations is huge component of it. So I love that you brought that into the conversation, because we have to remember to diversify our Rolodex to make sure that we have different type of counselors that handle different type of counseling, because everyone is, it's just not like a broad, even though you may counsel, you can speak to some specific things. Some behavior specialists may be better in some focus areas.
And licensed.
And licensed.
Well, please definitely recommend to people who are licensed. You know, I always say that coaching is different from what it is we're trained to do. And so you have to be careful about when Pandora's box is open, that you have the right people there to help and support the people that need it. So when you go through your own stuff, because everybody goes through stuff, how is it that you integrate the use of mental health services, especially as Black women? Because Black women carry a lot of stuff anyway. We're mothers and daughters and, you know, teachers and friends and just all these different roles that we're in, which can cause a lot of weight on your shoulders.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times as Black women, what we tend to do is to walk around with a cape on that nobody told us to put on, first of all. But we wear it because we've always worn it. And then it's like this expectation that you continue to wear it. So when you are dealing with your own mental wellness, we'll say mental wellness, what is it that you use, especially as ministers, and having to pour out to so many people? What is it that you use for your own self-care when you need to take off your mask? I thought I'd throw that one in there.
We do have to take off our masks.
A couple of them.
Okay, let's start right there. Well, for me, what I can say is there was a time that I used my we used to call them beauticians, right? I use my beautician as my therapist.
I think a lot of folks use
beautician. Right. And then, of course, I used my girlfriends as my therapist too, before I became comfortable with saying, oh, no, I really need to go see someone.
Right.
And the good thing about it is I have a great friend in Dr. Libya BaaQar as a woman in ministry, and we're able to talk and say to each other, no, you need to go sit on somebody's couch on that. You know, when we're talking, we have that face-off level of conversation. But for me, I have a combination of all of it. You know, I have someone's couch I can go sit on. I have a number that I can call. Then I also am a big fan of Zen too, you know, so I have to have my spa moments where I really, you know, put down a date that no one knows where I am. I schedule it as an appointment. And I have an appointment that day because that's the day that I need to recalibrate. And I think that it's okay to say that these are moments that I need to recalibrate, that I need to be one with God, one with nature. Then I need to come back and have an appointment, you know, because that's what's good and that's what's going to keep me going.
I think for me, I've learned I had to learn this. Let me say it, because that's probably the best way to say it. To try to differentiate, is this a couch moment? Is this a self-care moment? Or is this a sister circle moment? And if it's wherever it fits is where I would go. But that means you have to have all three in place. At your fingertips. So you have to be intentional also about those things. But you should have a therapist that you can go to if you don't already have a therapist. And so for me, that's how I do it. Sometimes it's just a sister circle time that I need to kind of express those things with Dr. Libby, Reverend Libby, and all these things that I am, caretaker, caregiver, you know, professional. All of that is just taken down. And I can just say, listen, my heart is broken. This hurt me so bad. Or I'm calling because you know what? I just want to cry or cuss. Can we be real? You know, and I need to go to that place to do all of those things. Now, if it's a couch moment and I'm at that place where I'm in a breaking place, for instance, you know, losing my mom, going through that.
I was going to ask you all to talk about a time when you had a mental health crisis of your own.
That was it.
And as a woman in ministry, how did you deal with it?
It was a really big one for me. And it was big because I carried my family. And I had no choice in that matter. It wasn't something I chose, it just happened. And not only did I have to do that, I had to eulogize my mother because that was my mother's choice. So 54 days sitting by her bedside in the hospital after caretaking for her for 5 years, after throwing away my life, throwing away, I use that in a way not negative, but deciding to move in with her, to care for her, and doing all of that, dealing with a death, planning a funeral, being the minister, the person in the family, carrying that and holding my entire grief into after the eulogy. I knew I needed therapy. Because at that time, I was at my breaking point. When I finished the eulogy, after the last word, I turned to my godfather, who is a pastor but licensed clinician as well. He's a licensed counselor. He's retired now. I turned to him and cried right on the pulpit because I knew I had held it. I was watching the program like, y'all hurry up.
Well, you know that's a control thing when we feel like we've got to be a certain way for everybody that's watching us. Well, and the reality is sometimes what you feel is going to supersede all of that, and it's going to come out right there in that moment.
And it did, and that's really what it was okay for me. I felt fine, but immediately afterward, I said, I got to call somebody. I got to get somebody. I got to get. And I got into therapy, and I began to do, and I'm still in that therapy, dealing with that grief. And so
how long has it been?
It's September, so it hadn't been very long.
Hadn't been a year.
And so Mother's Day is coming, so dealing with all those things. So constantly still needing that therapy, and I get away. I travel to. I go and just it may be random. So they might not know what I'm on the plane. I do. If I feel it, I'm in the nail salon and I say, I need to go to Myrtle Beach. Book the flight that night. Went to Myrtle Beach. So it's just that's what I need to do for me. And then I need my sister circles too.
And a part of that is just starting to know yourself. The older we get, you start to learn yourself a little bit better.
And that's the hard one.
And what it is that you need. And not what everybody else raised you to think you should have. It's really learning what is it that I need. That's what mental wellness is all about.
And that's the hard thing too. I think you have to be kind of honest with yourself. And that as you say,
take the mask off.
Take the mask off. You want to present something that's not a good narrative.
All right, Pastor Eleshia. Well, you gonna jump in on that?
Oh, about an example? Oh, okay. It's so many. It's so many. I think we talk about one of the challenges I think in my life as being a woman that's a wife and as a mother, and I'm also a daughter. I carry the load and I carry the not the burdens of my husband, of my children, and then of my family. And so when shifts happen, you know, sometimes your ability to be able to shift,
and that's SHIFT.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead and lean in on it. When shifts happen in life, being able to how you shift when things happen, and then rebound after those things happen has a lot to do with your mental capacity and your mental space. And so there are often sometimes where the shift may come and I may not be able to bounce back as quickly. So I have to take a step back, a couple of steps back to say, okay, this is troublesome for me, you know? Job loss, job transition. And those are the things that I guess hold dear to my heart sometimes that overwhelm me because that's tied to financial stability.
That's right.
And financial stability is tied to everything else that goes on in the household, you know, and how it impacts kids and how it impacts your spouse and how it impacts everything.
And your self-esteem.
And my self-esteem.
The anxiety that comes with that's the thing that I've been in my grief process is I've been working on my anxiety.
Yes.
And anxiety is tied to the need to control.
It is.
That's why we become anxious. When we feel like we don't have control over things.
That's exactly right, and that is all me. You know, and that's what I'm wrestling with, saying no about things. I had to take myself out of preaching engagements. And Pastor E knows that I just didn't do any. I didn't want to.
And no is not a cuss word. No is not a cuss word.
Okay.
And it's a complete sentence.
Thank you.
And so, you know, when I deal with people who say, I feel so bad for saying no. And I'm like, why? Why do you feel I can't say no? And I'm like, yes, you can. I just heard you. You can say you can say the word, but you have to put the action behind the word. Yeah. So when you all deal with women, and I hear you talking about the sister circle, and I have a sister circle, but everybody can't be in my sister circle. Everybody's not a fit for me, and I'm not a fit for everybody. And so outside of your sister circle, when you are dealing with women in the church that you might find difficult, how do you manage those relationships? Because I know y'all got some women up in them churches that you would rather not see Miss So-and-so, deaconess such and such, mother board so-and-so coming in your direction. When they come, when you see them coming, you want to turn and run, but you don't.
Right.
So how do you manage that? Because as we get older, sometimes we don't want to put a mask on. Sometimes we don't want to fake it until we make it. Sometimes we want to be able to be real and honest with people. And the reality is, you're not gonna like everybody, and everybody not gonna like you.
It is.
Yeah. Right. And but one thing about it, we're leaders, you know, and so we're not new to this, we true to this. Sure. And so we have developed what we call relationship boundaries. Right. Well, not only that, I think it's more than that. It's more relationship intelligence, you know, where you know how to navigate personalities. And so we are trained, and so we're taught. So I think that training and that teaching helps us know how to navigate people. And so we're in the people.
But you know, sometimes that training and teaching goes out the window.
It does.
Because I'm trained and taught too, but that don't mean I won't cut somebody out sometimes and then have to apologize later for it. I think it's humanness. It's being human.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But for me, it's being. There was a time and place for me that I could go to 10 real quick, you know, and then and sometimes that old Elisha, I had to tell her sit down, you know, like you have grown from that, you know, and so I no longer brag on that part. So me being emotionally sound and having more control over my emotions, saying, okay, there's a place that I don't like to
Absolutely.
be, right?
Absolutely.
And because I don't like to be in that place, I keep that. I keep a good pulse on that place, right? And so that helps us.
But sometimes that's people. So I think a part of that pulse is recognizing. I would imagine that, you know, you have to it's sort of like being a therapist. I have to know when I'm not a fit for somebody. And I might have to say, I need to refer you to somebody else. I'm not fit for you.
Right.
And so I would imagine at being in the ministry that you got to have some point people too, where you can say, you know what, I need you to deal with Miss So-and-so.
We have to have that in place. I mean, don't you think so?
Yeah, I think what it is, for me, it's boundaries. And again, the relationship, relational intelligence.
Yes.
So that part does work, because you know, one thing about your congregation, you end up knowing who is who and what is what. And so you can kind of determine which one's going to always kind of be
your antagonist.
The antagonist, or messy, or nice, nasty, or unaccepting of women.
Right.
So you kind of know who they are. And I think for me, I have to learn what my triggers are, because they come in to pull that trigger, and real, she ain't dead. She just parked.
Right.
That's what I say. I like her park. I don't want her to be dead.
I say mine is at home in the closet on Dad's house, but she only 90 minutes away. I look at Fayetteville, they 90 minutes from me.
I'm okay with her being parked, because sometimes I can pull her and drive. It just has to happen.
Yeah.
So what I do is those boundaries. So if say for instance that we're going to speak in the church context, if that woman or that sister comes up And I know that sister's always pouring something negative into me that's going to trigger me. And I know I'm in a sensitive place right now. That anything gonna take me to 10. When I see her coming, the conversation is going to be short.
Right.
I don't care if she's coming to tell me about stuff. That's right. It's gonna be very brief. It's gonna be, how you doing? How's it going? Blah blah blah. Talking. Thank you so much. You know what? I gotta run, but yeah, I'm praying for y'all, and I'm going
and done.
So that boundary is created, so that she does not have to cross over certain lines that trigger me. Now there are days they still do it, you know, because some of them are quick, you know, in the conversation to do it, and you just got to take yourself from there.
And that's controlling what you have control over, which is yourself,
right?
Because you don't have control over everybody else.
Right. Yeah.
But how it is that you choose to respond to something is within your control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you think the church can do a better job in terms of mental health and kind of bridging the gap in terms of what services and, you know, people might need that are in your congregation?
Have the conversation.
And I think this month, one of the things that I did in this space, because I'm a human resources leader and professional by trade, I shared, please, you know, let's start a challenge where within your employers that you say, check in on your coworker.
Yeah.
And so this month I also did it in my women's community, because I have a women's ministry community as well. But I said, well, check in on your girlfriend.
Yeah.
You know, check in. And so I think having those check-ins and people seeing one another to really say, no, how are you doing?
Yeah.
One of the things I experienced was I lost one of my good best friends, you know, due to a mental health crisis. She was my college roommate. And so because of that, that was a huge learning experience for me that I carried with me through all spaces, especially with dealing with women, because I can now recognize that the mask or the eyes, that I can see, oh, there's something more going on with that person. And so the question like, hey girl, how you doing? Okay, that's good. That quick, no, how you really doing?
But then being able to get people to feel comfortable enough to even be honest in that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because for so many people, they don't feel comfortable doing that. And so you know, when I ask people how you doing and they say okay, I say okay, it's not a feeling.
Yeah.
And it stops people like because that's what we're used to saying, because we don't really want to open up and share how it is that we're doing.
Yeah, I think we got to start having those conversations in the church. I think instead of shunning away from them, talk about them and quit acting like it does not exist in our community. And once we start being very conversational and making it okay to talk about, and I'm talking about from pulpit. And implementing things within that we can have that conversation and we can sit down and people can, and I think you'll have more people that come up. Why don't we have sermons that talk about the fact that Saul in the Bible was mentally ill?
Yes.
He was mentally ill. He suffered from mental illness. And he needed David to play the harp to soothe the mental illness. Why don't we talk about it from that perspective?
Yeah, I think that if you know, because I always tell people I'm not a Bible scholar, could have never been first lady, because I like tequila, trap music, and tattoos.
You can take all that.
And so I'm just saying, you know, stay in your lane, stay in your lane.
You can take all that.
But you know, so I'm not learned in terms of that. And I was raised Catholic, where we were not reading the Bible. That's not what you do in the Catholic Church. So to know even that, that makes me say, oh, I want to go and do some research about
a
that.
lot of it in there.
But I definitely think that there are a lot of things that have not been traditionally talked about in the church, and we allow the behaviors to just continue. You know, whatever the pastor was doing and who he was doing and all that kind of stuff. And we just didn't talk about it, but everybody knew what was going on. Same thing with mental illness. It has always existed. But we became very comfortable, especially as Black and brown people, to make conversations like, oh, you know, that's just how so-and-so is. And you know, so-and-so just a little touch, that kind of stuff. We have to expand our vocabulary and start calling it what it is.
Real quickly, let me say to you, a learned preacher and pastor is an effective preacher and pastor. And a lot of times we have people in pulpits who are not learned. And I'm not necessarily saying it's seminary trained. I'm saying even if you're not seminary trained, you ought to be taking some class. You ought to be auditing something. You ought to be continuing your education so that you don't read things in a way that's not, you're not able to convey them as they are. And real quick, the church hurt is a part of that mental health as well. And so we those of us who are not learned.
I just led a conversation about church hurt.
And so because we're not learned.
Well, but I think that it starts too with you being in touch with yourself and what you've gone through. When you have unresolved trauma, even as a person who stands in a pulpit, just because you can stand up there and deliver a sermon does not mean that your junk has been healed. You got to heal your own mess in order to be able to help other people recognize that they need healing too.
And that hurt is real. They're just not coming to your church because they don't like you. They've been hurt by somebody else. Acknowledge it, recognize it, and let's see how we can reactivate
bridge the gap because I think that churches are filled with individuals, just like churches, corporations, sororities, and fraternities, everywhere you go, filled with people who are carrying hurt that they have just continued to try to move through. But what we are seeing now is that we've got a society full of hurt people, and that's why we got so much stuff going on that we don't understand and how it's triggering people and how they're acting and responding. So,
and people are bleeding out loud if we're not listening.
Well, I appreciate you all letting me be a part of this conversation because it's important that we continue to expand the conversations about mental health. What better month to do it than mental health?
That's right.
Yes.
We all challenged today to do more. We all challenged to do more.
Thank you so much.